back to another one of Don's Get Your Health Back series. I was watching a program the other day of how a lot of adult conditions can relate to what happens to a child when they're younger. Now there's actually a study on this, Brad.
Yes, so the study's called the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Event Study. And basically, to summarize this study, they followed children from birth up to about 18, 20 years of age, 17,000 children over in Europe, I believe it was Denmark. And over this time, they actually concluded that if a child was exposed to an adverse childhood event, an adverse event during childhood, they were 100% more likely to develop an autoimmune disease or an inflammatory chronic disease. Now, these adverse childhood events, they're very serious. We're talking about a family member going to prison, alcohol use from a family member, drug use, sexual abuse. These chronic and life-changing events in a child can actually affect the individual later on in life. Now, recently, science has started to question, but how? What is the mechanism of action? One proposed theory, which is quite interesting, is through something called epigenetics. So epigenetics of inflammation. So they theorize that it's an inflammatory response early on in life can change the way your body can actually produce inflammation later on in life. You're more likely to produce more inflammation when you're older if you're exposed to these adverse childhood events. Now here, this is something that gets really interesting. A study came out looking at, okay, how can we change this epigenetic, this expression of our genes when it comes around to inflammation? You know which herb made the greatest impact on changing our body's expression of inflammatory markers? Turmeric. And a magic herb when it comes around to reducing inflammation from a DNA source, from a DNA level, from adverse childhood events, from a child early on in life.
And if you use the curcumin, which is only 3% of turmeric, that's even greater again.
Much stronger. That's the active component within turmeric.
Wow, so we've got a lot of conditions. So it's not genes or DNA, it's an influence from your youth that can cause a condition. Was there a relationship between the type of event and the type of condition that people had?
Unfortunately not. In science, we weren't able to answer that, but it was more chronic diseases, especially inflammatory diseases, autoimmune diseases in women were the greatest evidence when it comes around to these adverse events.
There we go. Something I've been saying for ages is that events that happen early in life can create conditions later on in life. And one of the things I wrote in my book and I've got in my movie is that going back to the source of the disease, it's not what we've been eating or lack of exercise. Quite often the source of many, many conditions can be back when we were a child with something that was implanted in our thought pattern, which later on creates inflammation and then cause disease. So there you go, there's a little bit of food for thought. Where does disease begin? Have a think about that. And next time you have a little bit of an itch or a pain, go back. How far back can you go to relate your condition to what happened to when you were a child? There you go. And thank you for watching another one of Don's Get Your Health Back series.